I'm Steph.
And we have a big announcement today.
Yeah, we do.
So we wanted to officially announce that we were going to be launching our podcast, TacoBagel.
What?
Get it? Taco.
Bagel.
Ah, clever, I know.
It's funny because I'm Jewish and she's Latina, and that's like, stereotypes are funny, right?
Yeah. Anyways, so we actually did like a trial run of the podcast. Was it last month or?
It was like a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago. Where we talked about Christmas hegemony, and some of the problems was kind of the way that Christmas has been commercialized and capitalized off of.
We reclaimed the Grinch.
Yes, we reclaimed the Grinch. We talked about a bunch of different topics, and the video did pretty well. We had about 900 views.
We did? Oh my god, I got up to 900.
Or maybe I'm wrong.
Let's go with that. Let's go with that.
Well, it had a good number of views.
We aren't big enough for Snopes yet, so let's just say it got 900 views.
Right. Listen, we had 100,000 views. We had a lot of views.
10 million people tuned in.
More views than I expected, for sure.
Yes.
So we kind of used that as like a trial run for what we've been trying to do. And we've talked about it for the last couple of months, is that we wanted to create sort of a podcast/web series that would make it so that people everywhere could learn and kind of like unpack some of the things that they've like learned or unlearned in the last lifetime of theirs.
And also so they could enjoy our wonderful friendship.
Yeah, and also because we're just like sassy and smart and wonderful, and like we drink a lot of wine and we do a lot of work, and sometimes we like to decompress and like unpack for ourselves because there's a lot of things that we're still learning too. So we were hoping that we could share our journey of unlearning with the public and make it as accessible as possible, because I think a lot of times when we do community workshops or things like that, they're really hard for people who are working class, who are disabled, who are just, unable to get to the physical locations. So we wanted to make it as easy and accessible as possible for everyone.
Yes.
So.
And we also want to give our friends who are never on Facebook an excuse to get on Facebook. There's a few of you out there who only go on like once a week. Shout out to y'all. We know who you are. And hey, now you have an excuse to go on a little bit more often and be your wonderful extra selves.
Yeah, and hopefully our plan is to officially launch in January.
Yes, on the anniversary of the apocalypse.
Yeah, the apocalypse, which is the 1 year anniversary to Trump's inauguration. So,
boo.
Yeah.
Look at me, I'm a liberal. Boo. Don't boo, vote.
Oh my god. Yeah. So what we're hoping to do is just do an overview of the year that has happened, and that's going to be our official pilot launch.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about everything that changed, good and bad, in the last year.
Oof.
Mostly good.
We're going to need more wine.
Yeah, we're going to
need more wine.
A lot of wine for that conversation.
An awful lot of wine for that conversation. Oh my god.
So that's one of the things that we really just wanted to announce to everyone and share with everyone.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be making public the official Facebook page soon, and sharing to give a little teaser. So, yeah. So.
All right. Yeah.
We are doing a little conversation, another teaser conversation today, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. There's a lot that's been happening lately, both like nationally and within our home community, about accountability and disposability. There was the whole Me Too movement that really launched this honestly wonderful like reckoning and shellackening and shookening of men across the country, in a real attempt to hold them accountable for the fucked up shit that they've been doing their whole goddamn lives.
And everyone came out of the woodwork and was like, oh my gosh, this person is a sexual predator?
Yeah, a lot of people got like their whole entire ass exposed.
Yeah. I mean, all of the asses were exposed.
Every single ass was exposed in some way, and some of them were not cute.
Yeah, most of them.
Most of them were not cute. Most of them were not cute.
All sexual predator asses are not cute, I would say. I mean,
all rapist asses are ugly.
The biggest thing about that movement that I thought was mildly amusing was that all of these men were like, oh my gosh, like, I never knew how many of the women in my life had faced. And, like, obviously, like, sexual assault, like, those sorts of things, like, they happen on both sides, right? Like, they happen on all sides, like, men, women, trans folks, like, everybody in between. They have, so many different forms of, like, aggression and manipulation and coercion. But from what I've seen, statistically, a majority of that aggression is coming from men.
A vast majority. And the rest of us, while they were like, I had no idea, we're all just collectively looking into the camera like we were on The Office.
Yeah. We were Jim in The Office, like, ugh. But, yeah, that was definitely one big thing that came out of this. And I was surprised. I was surprised, given the general direction of our country, how...
This actually happened in 2017 in this economy.
Yeah.
In this economy, socially and otherwise.
People acted really fast. And the one thing I said that I think was really important is that, I think people think about this as, like, sexual predators are, like, this type of person. And statistically, like, a majority of, like, people who experience sexual violence or rape of any sort, they are with intimate partners or people they trust or individuals in the community. And that's something, that even in our community, organizing communities, we're constantly battling. This isn't like a left and a right argument. This is very much a, like, who is accountable in our community.
Right. And, like, how do we treat the culture of disposability and, like, disposability politics?
Right. Yeah. And the big thing about that is, so in our organizing, not all organizing communities, but in our organizing community, we have this sort of, like, no police, no prisons mantra. And I think that's really important to talk about because for us, so much of creating that change or creating the type of world that we want to live in is modeling that world, right? And it's very much like touch and go, like we're learning about how to deal with sexual predators.
Right.
We're dealing with how to learn about these things sort of as they come up. And I know there's a lot of critiques of restorative justice, and they're valid and fair critiques.
Especially how it gets weaponized so often by the people who do harm. We have a mutual friend who was bringing this up the other day, who was talking about how, restorative justice is so often weaponized by people who are like, I want mediation. I did you wrong. Like, I need to be mediated at and, like, learned at, and you need to expend all of your emotional labor so that I can be less shitty. And sometimes people are just like, no.
Right.
Fuck that. And fuck you, and back off, and I just want to go on with my life.
Yeah.
And it's created this whole thing where, like, and restorative justice so often resembles suing people, but, like, in the community, like, communally suing people, where you, like, bring whoever before a jury of their peers and, like, a moderator who acts as a judge, and you, like, figure out some sort of fair and equitable solution so that the harm is addressed and both parties can go on with their lives. Yeah. But it often, like, the systems that it resembles don't often, like, and I'm not saying that there's anything good about, like, suing people in the actual U.S. court system, because ew. But, like...
I mean, unless they're rich. Sue the fuck out of the rich.
Yeah, sue the fuck out of rich people. But, like, one of the most important parts of restorative justice processes is consent. And we're seeing right now a really big trend of consent being almost removed from the process, not necessarily by the mediators or by, like, the people who are victimized by others, but by the perpetrators, where they're using this sort of, like, this social capital that the idea of restorative justice has gotten to weaponize that against the people that they've harmed. And just saying, like, when people don't want to go through restorative justice processes, it's implied sometimes by perpetrators that whatever wrong happened to them was lesser because they didn't want to mediate it out through, like, this and, like, restorative justice processes take a long time.
Yeah.
Like, nobody has time to go through that in every situation.
I mean, and this is kind of, I'm not going to give any details, but this very specific example of, like, there was an issue that occurred in the community that I was trying to get a mediator for, and it was nearly impossible because everyone knows each other in the community.
Right.
So everyone has a personal bias. Everyone has a personal relationship with someone or somebody involved in this conflict. And
like, what do you do when giants of your scene fight? Like, how can you not take sides?
Right. And so many of our very well-known, like, activists are, like, put up on this platform, like, they're idolized, and they do the work. They should be given credit for this.
They deserve it.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's so easy to be surrounded by, like, yes men and people that, like, affirm you and people that, like, constantly don't push back, right? And I think that's, like, the biggest thing is that, like,
yes.
Yes. Or you could have just said no to prove a point, but
but I did it anyway.
Yes. I think like that's one thing I try to do is like surround myself with people who like respect me enough to like challenge me and like push back and like clock me when I need to be clocked. And like I hope that like I have established a type of relationship with people that they feel comfortable to like call me in, right? And I think that is a big thing right now. It's the calling out versus calling in. Like, what does that look like, and when is one appropriate over the other, right? Because I see a lot of people in the communities that do call outs, and some of them are absolutely effective. They're great. They've done wonders. Others are just like
messy.
And yeah, like what, when do you decide which one?
Right. It's like a bad call out is like to be like the bougiest that I can be. A bad call out is like a poorly executed souffle. If the souffle falls, your call out's trash.
Okay.
Yeah, but like, it looks bad and it's not good for anybody. You can't eat it then. But like, what we wind up doing is we have this culture of disposability when we have call outs where we sort of expect when we call people out that the person who's being called out is then unceremoniously like thrust to the curb and like jettisoned from their respective communities.
Right. And is that contradictory to the
whole restorative
justice, world that we want to model? Is it?
I mean, like, I feel like it can be. Like, it definitely can be depending on who's the target of the call out. Like, when black and brown women and femmes and trans people are the target of these call outs, like, I firmly believe, very, very firmly believe, that, you don't get infinite chances for being severely marginalized, but you do get a couple more. Like, you get the opportunity to unlearn all of the internalized bullshit that you've picked up along the way from being a severely oppressed person.
Right.
And the more, like, there are black trans women in our community who have repeatedly done stuff that's been called out and, like, is like, objectively shitty. And time again, we're willing to like take them by the hand and sort of like walk them through a healing process and a restorative justice process and a mediation process, because we recognize that like it is the hardest thing on earth to be a black trans woman. Like, and so you do get a lot of chances when you're significantly oppressed, but there's also the flip side to that, where like when you're calling out like cishet men. And like particularly cishet white guys, but like cishet men also in general,
who already get all the infinite chances.
Right, where like, people will like line up to cape for these guys no matter what they've done. I mean, like we see this in terms of like, to follow back up on the Me Too thing, like how many times has R. Kelly been called out for his fuck shit? And the man still has successful music records. The man still's releasing like singles and he's doing fine, but he's like literally a pedophile.
Yeah.
And people line up to cape for him. But when it's like a woman of color or like a lesbian, people immediately jettison them. And I think part of that is the community that these people belong to. Like R. Kelly probably belongs to a community of people who are like more likely to be ain't shit.
I mean, I would argue that that's the case in every community.
Right.
And I see that in our communities. I think it's so easy to like preach and like talk about like the politics that we're about, and it's totally different when you're confronted by it. Right. And I think it's taken me a long time to get to the point where I'm at right now, and when
Same.
It's continuous people have like plaqued me and said like, I don't know how I feel about that, or taken me to the side, and I think, and I'll clock myself. Like I think the biggest thing that like stands out in my mind is like when I went to U of I. Right. They had just gotten rid of the chief mascot. And I was like just this sort of like young, naive, like didn't really know that much about like social justice or like in general like awareness about what was going on with that. and I had like worn like a U of I shirt with like the chief symbol on it, and my boss, who worked at the Latino Cultural Center at the time, Ronnie Khan.
Oh, Ronnie.
No longer with us, but she was like one of the biggest influences in my life, and she like straight up was like, "Why are you wearing that?" And it kind of put me on blast, right? And I remember in that moment in time, I was like so like embarrassed. It was so awkward, and a lot of it was because I was put on blast in front of everyone.
Right.
And she was like a good person. She was someone that was close to me, but even in that moment in time, I felt so like defensive, right? And I think what ended up happening after that is that there was a person who also was like part of the cultural center that like, she was a graduate student. Her name is Heidi. She like pulled me to the side and she was like, "Hey, look, I heard about what happened. Like, I know you work at the cultural center, so I know you must have some knowledge about like what's going on in the world, right?" And like, she started giving me like examples and like history. And once people start incorporating history, I think it starts becoming clear, right?
You gotta contextualize shit.
Right.
Yeah.
Context is so important. And one of the things she said...
Context is how you learn.
Yes, context, history, just personal interaction, respect, right? And so one of the things she said to me that I'll never forget is she's like, "All right, like, I'm sure you can't really visualize why exactly the chief is so harmful right now in this moment in time. But imagine," she said, "if we were like U of I rabbis, right? And like you had this like white guy who's non-Jewish run out into the field."
Oh my god! Is that the actual example that she used?
Yes.
Oh my god!
Yes.
Heidi,
if you're watching, thank you so much for this example. But she was like, "Yeah, if you're Illini rabbis, every time someone scored the touchdown, this like non-Jewish white guy's like Mazel Tov," and like I was just kind of like, that's absurd. Like, who would ever do that?
It's funny because you know how many Jews play football? Very few Jews play football.
Well, okay, that's not.
It's also anti-Semitic as all hell.
Yeah.
But
and so it was that moment, and it wasn't like all of a sudden I had this huge epiphany, and I was like, "Oh, like now I'm woke. Now I understand." I was like, "Ooh, that sounds problematic. That's a little off." And that was just like the beginning of me beginning to learn more about like what the chief meant to Native people, how like, you know, like how the Native culture was sacred, like how we desecrated all of that. And so it was like the beginning processes, and it took someone to call me in to do that, right?
I'm glad my people could contribute to learning.
Well, Heidi is actually, I think Heidi's just, I think Heidi's Latina. Like, I think
well, I'm glad a fictional rabbi could contribute to learning moment.
But, I mean, and I think that's the big thing. It's like, what is the purpose of having these interpersonal relationships, these connections to the people in the community, if we can't use those to our benefit?
Right. Like, like, there's not a point then. Like, the reason that you make friends, the reason that you have, like, the reason that you're in coalition and solidarity with other people is so that when you, like, are trying to do your work and you fuck up, or, like, even when you're on some petty-ass bullshit and you have a power trip and, like, you do some fucked up shit.
Yes, someone will
like,
call you.
Somebody will be like, "Hey, you did a thing that wasn't great. It hurt some people. Let's talk about that. And let's get back to doing the good work that you do." Instead of, like, just putting you on blast and, like, blowing shit up and acting like people are disposable. Especially in, like, queer and trans communities and black and brown communities, because so few of us are disposable.
Yes.
Like, we can't, there are so few of us that are high profile that do this work that, and we've gone through, like, who the fuck knows how much for how long to get to the point where we're at. And it seems like so often people are terrified of making single mistakes, that when people do make single mistakes, there's this, like, eagerness to jump on people and just get rid of them.
Yeah.
And it's not, like, and, you know, I would sort of make an exception to this for men, but that's because I, as a certified card-carrying member of the Intergalactic Lesbian Council's Committee on Man-Hating,
you know what?
I'm not fond of men, but, like,
yeah.
for, like, women and trans people who don't identify as women, and, like, people who are, like, non-men in general, this sort of culture of disposability is so, so toxic.
But I also think, like, kind of to go along with that, it's like, at the end of the day, it's not really about what, like, we or any single person wants. It's like, who are we centering in this conversation? And that is always, I think, as activists, like, we get carried away in our own, like, soapbox. Like, we get carried away in, like, you know, the things we write and the people that kind of, like, like, the things we say, the things we write, the work we do, and the people that support us.
Yes, yes.
And that support has been so valuable and so, like, life-affirming for me. And at the same time, like, I sometimes have to, like, check myself and, like, say, like, am I really writing this, or are people just telling me I'm right?
Right.
And...
Right.
I'm just gonna say no one of these
No,
times.
never. You're horribly wrong.
But, you know, like, it's really easy, and I think it's really difficult for us to, like, decenter ourselves from stuff that, like, personally affects us. And that's, like, huge, is when we're able to, like, sit there and say, like, alright, like, I think this ain't shit person is not shit, but what does the person who's been harmed think?
Right. Because it's not about us. Like, when individual instances of harm have been done, because we all know that, like, harm to an individual person also has community level impacts. And we're not downplaying that at all. Like, we know that that's a very real thing, that, like, you know, injury to one of us is injury to all of us, and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, injury to one of us is also still injury to one of us. And when we're talking about that sort of a thing outside of, like, the traditional power structures in which that phrase was envisioned, like, when we're talking about intra-community shit, the needs of that person have to come first. And, like, it has to be handled in accordance with their wants and their needs and what's going to be most healing for them, rather than, you know, grab your torch and pitchfork.
Yeah. And I see that a lot. I see people kind of hijacking people's trauma. And it's
re-traumatizing them.
Yeah, re-traumatizing. It can be, like, triggering for folks. It's also, I mean, it's easy for someone who has had similar experiences.
Right.
And I had a friend who dealt with a restorative justice process in a really high-profile case with, like, a very, like, well-known Chicago activist. And one of the things she would say is that, like, people would hit her up all the time in her messages and, like, say, like, oh, you know, I heard about this case. Let me tell you all about, like, my sex. Like, unburdening all this emotional baggage on her.
The First National Bank of Emotional Labor.
Yeah. And she was just like, oh, like, yo, this shit is triggering. Like,
right.
I already have to deal with one sexual assault situation. Like, I can't take on everybody else's.
Right.
And, like
survivors aren't Mother Teresa ain't shit. But, like, survivors aren't, like, the depository for, or, like, the repository for everybody else's collective trauma either.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's a really good point to bring up, is because, like, just because you've had trauma doesn't mean you're not incapable of inflicting trauma on others, and, like,
hurt people.
Yes. Damaged people love damaged people.
Yes.
And also, like, at the same time, it's just, like, it's not fair to just take someone who's not qualified, someone who, like, you know, like, there's definitely, like, spaces for that, and
you gotta be equipped for shit.
Yeah. I don't know, I personally, I think, like, I find that, like, the more transparent you are with people, the more willing they are to, like, dump themselves on you. And that's not necessarily, like, the most effective or best thing for me, like, as a person.
Oh, God, and same, like, you know, I mean, you know, I am, like, very much a mom TM and a grandma TM. Like, I will let everybody vent their heart, their soul, and every single one of their problems.
You can't say no.
I can't say no because I'm too nice of a person.
Yeah.
But also, like, because I love caring for people. But also...
But that care also comes from trauma, right? It's feeling like your family and you have family.
I was never loved as a child. And so I have to love people extra in order to feel love.
Same.
Oh my God, look at us being similarly damaged.
Yes, oh yes, to trauma. Anybody else out there with a glass of wine.
Oh my God.
But yeah, you were
saying. Like, I do all sorts of emotional labor for, like, the people that I know and that I love. But then that leads to people who, like, sometimes I don't give a shit about. Being like, Steph, Mom, hi. And I'm like, who are you? Am I your mom? What's hi, hello? Hi? Can I help you? Hello?
New phone, who this?
Like, this is customer service. Can I help you, please?
I
and
mean,
like, you know, it's fine. Like, especially if these people are trans people, like, I feel this sort of like weird obligation to be like, you know, okay, I'll listen to your problem and I'll help you because this is what trans women have historically done.
Yes.
But also like evolve. Like,
there's a lot.
It's a lot.
I think like our community collectively has gone through so much trauma, and it's so easy to unload on people, right? But it's also so easy to continue that cycle of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like just to kind of like bring this back full circle, right? It's like we are a community of people who have been hurt and damaged and undermined by like all these systems in place.
Right.
And it is really easy for us to kind of find our niche and then like feel safety within that and then like forget about how like trauma and clocking and accountability and all this stuff has brought us to this safe place, right? And for me, like on a personal level, like sometimes I can visually see the things that I'm doing wrong while I'm actively doing them, right? And it's really,
I feel that.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to like unpack all of these things and like unlearn all of these like really harmful behaviors from like things that stem from my own experiences. And
it feels like that slow-mo shit in movies where like, no.
Yeah, and you're like, no, and everyone's like, no, and you're like, no, like, I've come too far, like, this is unraveled too much, like, I'm in too deep, you know?
Right.
And
some shitty music starts playing in the background, like, you walk away from an explosion, bad things happen.
Yeah. And, I don't know, maybe you're, like, never in too deep, you know, like, maybe...
Right. But, like, also, what happens when these sorts of, like, not even, like, big-time traumas, but, like, what happens when these sorts of, like, disputes over call-outs hit those home communities, like, our bubbles? What happens when, like, the things that happen when those bubbles get popped? I feel like we're so unprepared for that right now. Like, people in our activist communities and in activist communities that have been, like, built up right now, and, like, in the times that we're in, we've insulated ourselves and we've needed to, because the world is full of so much, like, random fuck shit that hates all of us and wants to kill all of us. Mm-hmm. We've needed to form our bubbles. But then when our bubbles get popped, we sort of just, we turn into, like, we go for this, like, really destructive free-for-all sort of, like, grab your people, run to your corner.
Align yourselves as quick as you can. But also, I feel like we are so quick to call out and drag and dispose of anyone outside of the community. Which in
or
some
even
way,
in the community. Sometimes in the community.
I feel like when they're not our heroes, when they're not the people that we're close with, you know, like there's like some circumstantial situations, right? And the way I see it is like when we see like the Harvey Weinstein, right? Like when we see the Bill Cosby, when we see these people in like media and like outside of the world that we exist in.
For the liberals out there, the Al Frankens.
Yeah. And I've actually seen liberals say like, I don't think he should
resign. Yeah. Because they're all like up in their feels about congressional seat counts.
Yes. Oh my God. Like.
By the way, liberals, if you're watching, the governor of Minnesota is a Democrat. You'll be fine.
I don't know if Minnesota will ever be fine.
Well, that's a different matter.
Watch someone take this video, post it on an I Love Minnesota page.
Oh my God.
And we're going to get doxxed.
Minnesota, we love you, but you'll get another Democratic senator, we promise.
Minnesota, you're alright. You're okay. I'm just joking. We're alright.
We love all states equally except for the bad ones.
Yeah, wait, what? Arizona could get chunked off of the United States and disappear into the abyss, and I wouldn't care.
That's one of the bad ones. We should get, you know. But, you know, in the case of bad states, also this is way off the rails, but, like, in the case of bad states, the best solution is decolonization. Those states don't belong to the United States. Those states belong to other people. And we should give those states back to those other people and also get rid of all the apeshit people.
I mean, that would be such a long process for us to, like, look at. I mean, we can't even, like, really get rid of the bad people in our own communities, so...
Oh, look at you getting back on track.
No, I mean, I'm just saying... I'm not looking talking at anybody in particular. I'm just saying, how the fuck are we supposed to talk about, like, change on a national scale if we can't even fucking deal with the bullshit in our own community?
Right.
And, like, this is just, like, me being super frank and, like, probably crass about this, but, like, we are, like, in a lot of ways, like, dropping the ball on this. And, like, I think, like, we've done so much work to get to where we're at, and, like, it's so hard for us to, like, be accountable for the people that we love and we care about, but, like, we need to do it. And, like, whether that takes, like, one restorative justice session or, like, a million of them, like, we can never stop trying, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, because that's what we're preaching and that's what we're saying. It's, like, this has to work some way or another. And I've seen restorative justice that has worked and has been effective. And it's been with people who have been harmed in a really terrible way.
Right, like, very substantial, like, material harms.
Yes. And it's inspiring and it's uplifting to see the work that we're capable of doing to that capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Do I think that we, on, like, a national, global scale, like, are we ready for all of that? No. Absolutely not. But still, like, fuck 12 tomorrow, today, whenever.
Yes. All cops are bastards. And for my fellow Jews watching, we all have an obligation to particularly dislike cops because, as we know, pigs ain't kosher.
Oh, you want to say anything else in particular about anything that happened recently?
Oh my god,
Maybe.
wait, which bits?
Which,
What thing has happened recently?
Just about the event.
Oh my god. Yeah, I mean, I guess, also because we're sort of running low on time.
Yeah, we're...
Yeah, I guess one other thing, since I'm talking to Jews out there, most of us probably all know that Cheeto Mussolini decided to endorse and recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, which is a load of shit. Jerusalem is the capital of the Palestinian state. Whatever that's going to look like in the future, it is a place of extreme significance religiously, theologically and culturally to a lot of people. But, like, Jerusalem belongs to Palestinians and is in Palestine. And, you know, people know me, know my politics, know that I'm gonna, you know, Palestinian folks are my ride or die. Like, I'm gonna be out there for Palestinian justice and justice for people in Palestine, like, up until the day that the Zionist machine assassinates me. But also, like, there's some shit going on, and I hope that other Jews who are watching will join me in saying collectively to Palestinian folks in our lives that we know, like, whatever you need, we're here for you, and if you need something that we can provide materially, reach out. Because we have to hold ourselves accountable also. Like, we're capable of causing harm on an individual level, but we're also capable of causing harm on a more, like, and not just Jews, like, people in general, are, like, capable of causing harm on, like, a broader scale than we realize, especially big name folks who do things, like, that may get them into some trouble and may harm people in material ways. Like, our actions have repercussions and can reverberate farther than we can even imagine them doing that.
Yeah. And I think, just to kind of wrap things up, like, we all have, like, existed in a way that was, like, harmful to other people at some point in our life. And I think we've talked a little bit about how there are multiple chances that are given to, like, cis, straight, white people, like, in so many different ways that we just don't get those opportunities.
Right.
And I, like, at the end of the day, like, my big, like, demand or my big hope is that, like, we are capable of using whatever conditions or personal relationships or networks we have and within our community to try and establish a channel or a bridge of communication. Because harm, you know, besets harm in some ways.
Right.
And all we can do is try to unlearn those toxic behaviors and, like, grow from them, but also create the type of change and nurturing and growth that we want to see in this world.
Right. Like, you know, the ways in which we call people out and the ways in which we treat certain people are disposable goes directly back to the ways in which we value people inherently. Like, if you value somebody and you value, like, the places that people come from and, like, the ways that they've treated you in the past and like the things that they've done. If you value somebody like that, they should never become. Well, all right, I say never with an asterisk.
Right. Yeah.
Never with a big asterisk.
Yeah.
But like you should put serious thought into treating them as disposable.
And in the same light, you should put serious thought into holding yourself accountable.
Absolutely.
And
that's the other side of the coin.
Right.
Like, you can't hold other people accountable if you aren't holding yourself to the same standard.
Yes, and beyond your hurt feeling, beyond the things that are like personal to you, think about like the actual harm that is being manifested, and understand that like you are not the center. Unless you are the victim of that harm, you are not the center of that harm. Right? So like, definitely be able to play both sides, like you said, both sides of the coin. Be accountable to people and hold yourself accountable.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I'm almost done with my wine.
Oh, I need to do some chugging, but.
All right.
All right. We love y'all. Catch us on the anniversary of the apocalypse for the official launch of TacoBagel.
And more info on that coming soon.
Yes.